This video, the middle-aged nerds discuss spoilers from books they read decades ago. Do you really need a spoiler alert? Do you really?
Hey, I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to Non-Terrestrial Half-Life.
Hi, I'm Bill, also known as Matt Stagger, and today we have joining us Jen, Keeper of the Chronicles. Welcome back.
It's always
Welcome back,
lovely.
Jen.
Yeah, it's always lovely being with you, gentlemen. And it's always a wonderful time to talk about things that we love, especially Dragonlance with you, and as well as various and sundry other subjects. So I'm excited to be on today. Thank you.
You've got anything coming up that you want to talk about? Plug on your channel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of got a thing. I'm the co-organizer of an event happening in Eugene, Oregon this June, June the 23rd through June the 26th. We're raising money for like book charities, but the main thing of it is it is the 30th anniversary of Betrayal at Krondor, the PC game coming out, which is a game I fondly remember and love as a child, based off the kind of a derivative of the Rift War series by Raymond E. Feist, who he was kind of, the main person that was behind the project, obviously. So I'm going to be there with a couple of the lead writer and a couple of devs in person, and we're just kind of going to be getting a big powwow and a get together. So I'm kind of raising awareness and funds and doing things on my Twitch channel and other social media outlets for that, and just kind of interviewing people that have played the game as well, and just kind of reaching out to the retro gaming community. So that's kind of what I've been up to, and I'm going to be up to until at least the middle of June, and then I'll get kind of a breather as I prepare to travel. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm excited to be that.
We'll be sure to have all those links down below where you can check out our Twitch channel and everything.
Definitely.
So we're going to have those down below in the description. So
Thank
check
you.
those out.
Yeah.
And a link to Jen's channel.
Thanks.
So I hear you had a reaction video come out recently.
So today, when we're recording this, I don't know if it's okay to say, but it's the release of the Dune 2 trailer. I'm really excited about that. I just got a reaction video that I put up to that as well. And yeah, I'm going to be doing another run of Betrayal at Krondor 2. So I've kind of updated a few things on my channel. I've given them a fresh look. So I know I've been on with you guys before. I'm a standard here, but if you haven't seen a couple of my social media channels, especially on my YouTube, go check them out because I've done a refresh on everything. So yeah, I've been kind of busy. Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to watch your reaction video yet, but I did finally see that trailer, and wow.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward.
I upgrade with kind of learning how to do things on the editing side, like on the back side of trying to make graphics and things of that nature. So as I progress, I realize that, like, wow, okay, I've learned a couple things since like 6 months ago. This doesn't look as nice to me now. I need to go back. And like, so maybe once or twice a year, I'll do a refresh, and now's the time. So yeah.
So what book are we here to discuss, Bill?
The Time of the Twins, the first book in the Dragonlance, is it Legacy?
Legends.
Yeah, Dragonlance.
I had a hard time remembering that myself, so.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm tired. I don't have my notes up. I need to do
There's
that.
so many Dragonlance series out there that it's hard to keep track of them all anyways.
That's true. A lot.
So, do you guys remember when you first read this book? And how old were you? And do you know or remember what led you to reading it in the first place? Jen?
With me? Okay, yeah. So I don't remember exactly, but I can tell you like the timetable. I was in middle school. I don't remember my very first read, but I know that the thing that prompted me to read this was just absolutely loving the first Chronicles trilogy. So it's kind of it's a sequel to it, but it's kind of a prequel at the same time because the events that happened are kind of in the past. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to the past and the Cataclysm because you hear all about it. Of course, that would be great. So that really excited me. And yeah, it was just a continuation of a story I'd already loved. And I was probably since I was in middle school, I can't say for certain, but I would venture to guess probably around 14-ish years old. So it was quite a bit after it was published, but I was still young.
Yeah, because this book came out in what, February of '86 when you were 3, I was 10, and Bill, you were what, 25?
Yeah, you wish.
Sorry.
Like, you're older than me, man. Come on. No. You're gonna throw me out there. You're getting it too.
Yeah. Bill, do you remember when you read it?
Yeah, I believe it was ninth grade, as a matter of fact, because I hadn't realized there were further books after the first three. I stumbled across them in the library at Stone Junior High. That was actually the name of my junior high. So
Wow.
I happened to see it on the shelf, and I was like, oh, and I kind of read the description on the flap and went, oh, okay. So we get more raced, we get more camera. Yeah, let's go. So
I think I was probably about the same age. I was somewhere junior high, high school age, mid-teens at least, 15, maybe 16 at the oldest, so maybe at the oldest 10th grade. I read them because, like, I had read the previous ones, and when I saw them on a shelf at the bookstore or the library, probably the library, I immediately checked them out. All 3 out, and I think I read them in a week.
Wow.
I just plowed right through them, because I had them all and sitting in a little stack next to my bed. Yeah, I really enjoyed them. Yeah, if I hadn't enjoyed Dragonlance Chronicles as much, I probably wouldn't have bothered with these, and which is sad because these are actually better, I think.
I did enjoy the story more, I think, this time.
Yeah.
Than I did I love the first 3, but this one really sucked me in. Once we got past Caramon being a self-pitying, oh man, it's so frustrating. At least that first quarter of the book, I want to strangle him.
Right.
But I think that's a testament to how well it's written, is the fact that it's enough to elicit that sort of emotion from me where I'm like, just want to choke him. So I'm like, okay, so it's written well.
What are some memories you have of reading the book the first time?
I'll let somebody else go. I just went first.
Bill?
For me, I really remember, Tasselhoff Barefoot mostly, because he's kind of my favorite character. So his bits and pieces really stood out in my memory. Some of the stuff with Chrysanthia, I think I'm putting a T in there. Chrysania. Yeah, I always do that. Chrysania. So I remember bits and pieces that there was a cleric who might have feelings for Raceland. I remember that much, but not much about her personality, things like that. I didn't remember any particulars other than I did remember they went to the past and that things got wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. So I remembered that.
Doctor Who.
For me, I remembered, I remembered the character Chrysania, and I think I liked her back in the day. I'm not sure why. At least now I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
This last read, or 3 reads I've done this past week, is just no, I don't like Chrysania anymore. But yeah, mostly it was, I remember them going back in time, and I remember, like the last sentence of the book, Tass looking out the window or looking up at the sky and watching fire rain down from the sky. The rest of the series, though, I don't really remember anything at this point.
I remember some bits and pieces from the next couple of books, but they're just bits and pieces. I need all the connecting pieces.
At least there are things that might be part of this next 2 books that I'm not sure are, or if I'm remembering them from other Dragonlance books. Like, do we go into an whole exploration of the Tinker Gnomes in this trilogy, or is that something else in Dragonlance?
I believe we do in the next book. We do.
Okay.
I don't want to give any spoilers, but I'm pretty sure we do. We meet at least one that I know of.
Yeah.
in the next book.
Okay. Because they weren't introduced in the original. Gnomes were referred to in the chronicles, but never actually seen. And I do know that I always loved Tinker Gnomes. And that I always thought that Aiel wore Tinker Gnome armor, which in D&D was like leather armor with pockets everywhere. You know, so that's what I thought Cod and Soar were like. It was like Tinker Gnome armor.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never would have connected those two.
I do remember reading a few things in this particular book, and I can't think of them offhand unless I find them in my notes. But I'm pretty positive Robert Jordan read these books. There are little things that just were quite unique at the time. I remember this, I don't remember seeing anything like that before I read them in this book that Jordan ended up picking up on. Just nothing significant. It just, I wish I could remember what they were, but yeah, I remember thinking to myself, rereading this recently, that Jordan definitely had to have read these books at some point. And I could be wrong, but I don't see it in my notes.
Think of anything I picked up on that would point to that, but I could have missed
like maybe character ideas or something. I thought I had them in these notes. It was the other set of notes that
I'll buy that for $1. I'll take it. That's a wonderful headcanon.
Yeah.
If you're going to throw a Wheel of Time into something, I'm okay with it. Pretty much anything. So.
The thing that I remember was the joke. For some reason, it was a joke that Taz makes to Caramon when he's doing his training or whatever like that. And he's like, Caramon's coming back and he's panting. And you think he's been tortured, right? You as a reader are like, oh my God. And then he's like Caramon, kind of going into what Bill was saying earlier about he's being so annoying. And he goes, what did they give you? Like the screws, the hot rack, the what did they do to you? And he's like, Kala. And Taz is like, Kala, I haven't heard of a torture named Kala. And he goes, calisthenics. And then Taz is like, what? You mean to tell me that it was just exercise? I thought you were tortured. Like he acted like he was scrabbling along the floor.
Calisthenics can be torture. They can totally be torture.
That I will always remember that for as long as I live. That really stuck with me. That was funny.
What stuck with me was Tasselhoff's just indignation. Calling him a big baby and being like, come on. Seriously? Stop being a baby. It's like you have to do exercises.
Taz is all grown up in this book.
Yes,
he grew up during the Dragonlance Chronicles and since the Chronicles. He's got a lot of maturity under his belt for 28, 29 years old. I think they said he is in this book. He's under 30, I think. Taz, he grew up. And it's part of what I loved about these books is Taz, Like I said, Tess will probably always be my favorite Dragonlance character.
Yeah.
Although Fizzband's pretty awesome too.
They were a pretty fun pair together. They also really enjoyed each other. Good friends. So, yeah.
So, when you first read these books, did they stand out in any particular way from the other science fiction and fantasy or other types of literature you were reading at the time? Or
yes, to me, pretty much because, the only thing I was immersed in, not only Dragonlance, but Forgotten Realms. So, that's kind of what I was reading at the time. I was just like, I want to read. There's so many novels that were coming out all of the time, right? But what made Dragonlance, in this series in particular, including this book, so different to me was that the way that they did time travel was so much more interesting to me. And the fact that you knew that the time travel was going to be across such a major event and they couldn't possibly freaking change it. Also, the fact that you just got introduced to, like Glenn was saying, characters or more mention of characters that you had known was around in the universe, but you had never really got to yet. Like you guys say, that's going to come up more with Tinker Gnomes and stuff like that. But it was Dragonlance, but there really wasn't a whole lot of dragons in this book. They actually kind of veered a little bit away from that for the very first time. Yeah, so it was kind of just, it was more like all dragons were bad, except a couple, like at the end of Dragonlance. Like there was one really good, kind of kindly older dragon. But like now you have one with like a name and kind of a personality, but it's evil, but it's not really that bad. Like there's a whole lot of nuance there. Like Sky is evil, but you kind of end up liking Sky. Like I don't know, it's weird. Bit. So yeah, I just thought it was really interesting, the change of pace. Because other authors would write the books and their tone and their pace would pretty much be the same, and the characters went like through one or two changes. You saw so many changes with so many characters in these books starting from right now. So yeah, different people.
I think for me it was the fact that they were far more flawed this go round. You know, the characters we get introduced, we see, you know, like I said, Caramon's self-pitying alcoholic who, you know, literally has everything in front of him, including the woman he loves, and just can't accept it for reasons that make me want to strangle him. You know, you know, you got other people who have other responsibilities. And I mean, you know, the first three books, they would have bent themselves over backwards and dropped everything to help a friend. But I mean, even at this, Tanis is like, look, I got stuff to do. Sorry, I can't do this. You know, I brought her here. I can't take her further. So you're going to have to do it. And I'll see you guys later. And I mean, you know, so kind of seeing them grow and develop and also realize, you know, they're different people now. It's been years. Things have happened. They have responsibilities and they can't be at each other's beck and call when they need help. And I like that because that's kind of how it goes when you go from being just a guy hanging out with his friends to, like, you know, a member of a family or something. That sort of crossover period where you're like, I can't go hang out. You know, I got a newborn at home type thing. So
there goes life.
Yeah. So that really stood out to me.
The thing that always set this series apart, and even to this day for me, is I can't think of any other fantasy. Well, what's traditionally considered fantasy, you know, my idea of science fiction being a part of fantasy aside, but typically time travel is only a science fiction thing.
That's true.
I can't think of another time, no pun intended, ironically coming from me, but I can't think of any other example of fantasy, of magical fantasy, that has time travel in it outside of this trilogy. And I've thought about it, and I can't think of any. It's usually, you know, what you find with the science fiction side of the genre. So that really stood out for me. Did it change your reading habits or preferences in any way after you first read these?
I don't think so, other than making me want more fantasy. At this point, you know, much like Jen, I was reading the Dark Elf trilogy, you know, which is Stu Erden. So, I mean, I was already in that area. So,
these are the first D&D books that I ever read.
Me too.
So, you know, it got me interested in reading D&D books, and I wasn't even playing D&D at the time. I had all kinds of books for it, you know, like rule books for it. I just didn't have a game group to play with. But, you know, I was reading Forgotten Realms. I even read one Greyhawk novel, I think City of Thieves or something like that. I vaguely remember it. I believe it was written by Gary Gygax himself, if I'm not sure. But that was the first D&D novel ever published. The only one to come up before the Dragonlance Chronicles. So the first time you read this book, who was your favorite character and why?
Raceland. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to get more about him. That's incredible.
Even after you finished this book, he was still your favorite?
He was already starting to stray a little bit.
Okay.
Taz really started to. I took a start more of a shine to Taz after the events of this book, especially. I was like, okay, he shows an even greater depth of character than I had previously noted before. So, it's not just, oh, he's a Kender. You're gonna never know what he's going to do. He puts a little bit of that aside in these books and takes some major responsibilities. So I was like, okay, that actually kept me intrigued as far as like moving from page to page than whatever the hell Raceland was doing off in his dusty tower. So yeah, that was more interesting to me.
For me, it was Tassel.
Mm-hmm.
Always. I mean, but I think he did grow. He went from the comic relief is what he felt like in the first three. And this one, he does have his moments where he does silly things and he's a little bit funny, but he also takes everything a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
I think that showed real growth. So he was my favorite.
He even decided to, single-handedly stop the Cataclysm.
Mm-hmm.
Which, too bad he went to Raceland for help.
Which is a little weird, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, see, this makes me wonder. No secret that Taz and Fizban, Paladine, are close personal friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know this. Does the Paladine of the time of the Cataclysm or before the Cataclysm remember Taz? Did the Dragonlance gods know time all as one point in time, or did they see all of time at once, or do they have past and no knowledge of the future?
So you're asking if they're omnipresent?
Throughout time at least.
Gotcha.
Do you think he would remember Taz or know who Taz is? Because he did
I think
know
he would.
I think so.
Because I'm thinking he knew that the companions were going to show up in Solace that night back in Dragon's Autumn Twilight.
Yeah.
He knew that they were going to be there. He knew where they all had to sit. So that makes me think he might actually have a pretty good working knowledge of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that the gods sent an intermediary to get what's her name?
Chrysania.
Yeah, Chrysania out of there because she was a true cleric shows that they know who the people are. So they're aware of them.
Yeah. Okay. Because, I'm thinking that I just blanked.
I keep wanting to call her Chrysanthemum. I can't help it.
Yeah, like the flower. Yeah, exactly.
So if Tess really wanted and had thought about about trying to stop the Cataclysm, he would have called Fizban. Just been like, he started praying, talking to the air to Fizban, because I'm assuming Fizban would be listening to Tasselhoff.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least we'll be aware of what Tasselhoff is saying, if not listening to him. I don't know, I just think that might have been a quicker way of going about it, trying to hey, Fizban, do you really need to do this? Maybe not. Don't punish thousands of people for the actions of, one king priest and a bunch of clerics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, though. If you looked around at the entire society that they ended up in, it was everybody. It wasn't just the king priest.
They were led astray.
A certain apathy and a certain, this is mine, I have a right to it, about everything in their life, including the gods, which is what angered the gods so. Who are you to demand anything from the gods?
Yeah.
And I think it's shown throughout the entire city during that time. Are there good individuals? Absolutely. But the overall population, I think, was at that point pretty well spoiled.
You think it was Sodom and Gomorrah as well?
I don't know what it was like in the greater realm of things. I don't know. I have a thing with, with cataclysms and great floods and biblical plagues and things like that. I just don't care for that sort of punishment. And but yeah, I think it was a very broad view to take care of a problem, which, I mean, if the gods are omnipresent, then they allowed it to happen, I guess. I don't know. That's my thing. But anyway, I could go into theoretical debate with that all day long,
right.
But this is not the time nor place.
On this, with this most recent read of the book, has your perspective on the characters, and especially your previously favorite character, changed in any way? And if so, how? For me, no. Well, my perspective on Tass has grown, my respect for him has grown, and I'm remembering more why I loved him so much, and loving the character development he's had that we've already talked about. So for me, yeah, the perspective has changed a bit.
I think for me, the biggest one was probably Raceland for me. I didn't care for him much. I know I remember pretty constantly not liking him, period. And I think we got a bit more glimpse at his actual personality and feelings in this one, and the way he starts to open up a little bit.
Is he though? Or is he just making shit up?
Could be either way.
I got some genuine moments from him, I think.
Okay.
Some genuine moments. There are others where he's clearly BSing, but there are a few, I think, genuine moments, particularly with Chrysanthemum, Flower Lady.
Chrysanthemum.
That's what I keep calling her, Chrysanthemum. But yeah, he had some moments, and some moments where he had to draw back because he admits he had shown too much of what he was actually feeling.
Okay.
There's a mention of that. She mentions the same thing because there's other times where Raceland does the same thing to her. So I think there were some genuine moments, and it was nice to see at least a flicker of humanity in Raceland, as opposed to I'm just a dick.
Yeah. I remain kerfluffled about Chrysania as I have through. I didn't like her when I first read it. I can sympathize more with her trying to do the right thing, but I also understand that I come from a bias of like truly devout good clerics, like all of the time, like that kind of personality, because I like Raceland, so of course you probably know how I'm going to feel about a character like that. So I understand I have a preconceived bias that I need to get over. That's on me. But so Chrysania, she was actually really not liked in the fandom. It was a big thing. I remember people talking about her then. She was across the board widely disliked. My partner can't stand her, but
I can't either.
But I can't. She's so freaking annoying, but like as I go back, can I understand her motivations? Yes. Would I make the same choices? Probably not. I would be like, nah, I'm not going to get involved. But I just can't make up my mind. I think that's probably better writing, because you don't want to like her, but you have to accept her. Like it's pretty good. She's like the do-gooder to Raceland's bad, and that's kind of why they're oil and water. So I get that.
To me, she sort of came out very stiff-necked and sort of, I know what's best. And I hate that kind of attitude, particularly when it comes to religious figures that it's my way or you're wrong. That bugs me, really bugs me, where you can't even have a dialogue with them if you disagree with something, So for me, she kind of put me off in that. I did see where she's coming from, though. I'm like, okay, I get it. But she's so stiff-necked about everything when it comes to her faith that she doesn't even take the time to examine, any other aspect of what the other person may be going through. She has zero empathy at first. I think she's starting to come around a little bit and realize that that way of thinking, being so rigid, is going to be detrimental to her own faith near the end.
I'm hesitant to even acknowledge the fact that her alignment, or the alignment of most of the rest of the Paladine priesthood, especially the King Priest, was actually good. because to me, the attitude that they portrayed, gave off is anything but good. It's the attitude that evil would have.
Well, that's why they dropped a mountain on them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
but it does leave you to wonder, where was the king priest getting this magical power to exude that aura that had everyone fooled by him, thinking he was so amazing and beautiful, and this glowing light that came off of him? If not from one of the gods, he's a priest. Unless we find out he was a wizard, really, and I don't remember that being the case.
In my head canon, it was Phisidanthlus. Was the one who actually came up with that. Him? Yeah, he's the one who came up with that, and that's the reason he kept him close and allowed him in the whole area. I mean, why else would a priest of Paladine allow Phisidanthlus to hang around? I mean, he's the Black Robe,
I guess. Yeah.
So in my head,
incredible smart. Yeah.
That really makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
I'll work with that.
Yeah, me too.
I can't attribute any good, lawful, neutral, or chaotic good to this church, of Paladine.
I think we knew they had gone off the rails according to their own beliefs when they tried to justify the whole slavery thing.
Yeah.
Through, these crimes are happening because they're poor. If we make them slaves, we'll provide them homes, food, and everything. Then they won't have to commit crimes. So it's okay.
Yeah.
From that moment on, I'm like, yeah, you're not good.
Yeah. And it was also better than killing them. That was the other explanation they gave. They did it in a way to avoid having capital punishment anymore.
My thing is did they give the slave that option? Would you rather be a slave and your family a slave for the rest of your lives in indentured servitude, or death? We're not going to take that away from you completely. Like, there's not going to be a judgment of that by your peers.
That brings me to one of the complaints that I've got about this book, is that it really does play down slavery and the gladiatorial games.
I was thinking of that. Yeah,
it plays both of them down big time. Yeah, it's supposed to be a book geared towards being teen friendly.
Your face ripped off by a lion, you can have that option.
Yeah, ripped off. It's still, reading it, I was just like, really doesn't feel like he's a slave, that he's been enslaved by anyone. It just, they had a collar around their neck, and Caramon was being made to do what he's good at, and he wanted to do since he was a kid: fight. He might not like killing, he says, but he likes to fight. He really likes to fight.
Okay, can we talk about how much the whole gladiatorial system is absolutely professional wrestling today? It's the same. I mean, it's still combat sports. These people, they're doing physical things. They're getting hurt doing them. Accidents happen and things like that. But it's basically a show.
Yeah.
And I love professional wrestling. I watch wrestling every week. Yeah, I'm not ashamed. Absolutely. I love professional wrestling. So I got a thrill out of the whole thing about, they're really out there swinging swords and stuff, but it is mostly a show.
Mm-hmm.
And just the parallel between those two just made me really happy.
Isn't it
cool.
More that professional wrestling is a modern day version of actual historical gladiatorial arena? Just like a lot of our other sports have a combat aspect to it. Football is totally an analogy for a battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
American football.
I think MMA is more closely related to what the gladiatorial fights would have been, whereas professional wrestling, like I said, it is scripted storyline wise. But what those guys do in the ring is very physical, and they do get injured and things like that.
Oh yeah.
So I think I would have to put it off to the side. I think MMA is a lot closer interlocked with what gladiators really would have went through. Because nobody dies, and most gladiatorial fights weren't to the death.
Right.
So I think MMA.
It's probably going, and sports are going to be around in any sort of civil society where you don't want people, like if you're in peacetime and you don't want to go to war all of the time, then you have to appease, because there's like some sort of human characteristic that we haven't disposed of within ourselves yet, of we need some sort of sport or like some sort of action, some sort of combat, some sort of something, and we can't just everyone in the populace be peaceful all the time and just be worker bees. So there has to be something like that for all, not only for the spectators but also for the people that are involved watching. I think every society is going to need that. Not just America.
They actually talk about that in the book, where the dwarfs talking about they got rid of the gladiatorial games altogether, and they discovered bar fights became more common. There was a riot. They, that the public needed a release valve, and he was the one who came up with okay, we're going to have them fight, only not really fight, and even showed him an example with his giant ogre buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to argue that. I do think, though, that professional sports overall really do fit that different sport for different people, or for some, all sports. There are those who like all sports, but it really does fill society's need for without bloodletting, that need for the bloodletting, what used to take bloodletting, when we were less civilized, to satisfy people. That's one of the big differences between us and 2,000 years ago, is they weren't civilized enough to be entertained without blood. My favorite character is still Tass, even though it's now a bit more clear to me how intellectually oblivious the little guy is. As much as I love him, he's not cognizant of what's going on around him and being talked about all the time. He seems a little just oblivious, I guess is the best word to go with, so I'm just going to stick with it.
I think it's his innocent nature that sort of makes him that way.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the capacity to look around at the scheming and everything happening around him and complex plans that, they're not interesting to him, because he's so innocent. And for him, it's all about, adventure, going out, roaming around a new city, occasionally picking up a random object, and it ends up in his pouch. No idea how, magically. So, I think that's just his nature more than anything else. And I think he'll always be at least partly that way, even as he grows.
I don't know if I've read any of his story past this trilogy or not. Well, yes, actually, now that I think about it, I have. Never mind. I remember that. Yes, now I remember.
I know. I was about to say, you read a little bit of War of Souls, so he's in there a little bit.
I forgot one other book that we'll be talking about in a few weeks, in a month or two here. So what things, if any, had you forgotten from your first read of the book that pleasantly surprised you when you reread it?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
For me, I'd forgotten how much of the book takes place in modern times. Like right after, like shortly after the Dragonlance Chronicles.
Yeah.
At least for our main characters. I'd completely forgotten about Karaman's drunkenness, and that he was Avengers Endgame Thor at the beginning of the book.
That's perfect. Perfect analogy.
It makes me wonder if the guys who wrote Avengers Endgame have read these books.
Probably.
Too. But who knows? They might have. I wouldn't be surprised. Not sure how I forgot any of that. It's been so many decades, that there's other thing that I noticed, and looking stuff up online has made me even more convinced of it. Ansalon, the continent everything takes place on, is in the southern hemisphere. I never realized that until I think it might have been when we were reading Dragonlance Chronicles. I first noticed something, but there was a line or two in here. So I'm starting to think, and there was a mention, he was either referred to as being hotter in the north, or it was cold even this far north. I think might be the line. It was cold even this far north. Just a couple little hints and everything to point towards this being in the southern hemisphere, and that the further north you go, the hotter it gets, the more sunny it gets. That you're closer to the equator.
I never even realized that. I just remembered always reading the southern continent of Ansalon, and I was just like, okay. And I didn't consider
I never noticed
the northern parts of it. Yeah, I just was like, oh, the southern continent of Ansalon, and just went about my way. I didn't really pinpoint that geographically, even though it explicitly states that.
And I've only read one other fantasy that I can think of that you learn in the text. It's definitely in the southern hemisphere, and that's the continent in the book Tigana by Guy Gabriel Kay.
I was gifted that for Christmas this past year. I need to read that. I know. That was gift to me. It was actually a gift to me from Neil from Betrayal Condor.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful books I've read in the last 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bill, did you have anything that you had forgotten?
Honestly,
or realized you didn't know?
Most of it. I remembered only bits and pieces here and there. So, I remember they went back in time, but I think the process of that whole thing was pleasantly surpriseful to me. And how Toss ended up going back. I had forgotten all about that. So that little whole section with the mouse and the ring, and that really, kind of made me chuckle.
The only thing that I can say is, even though the book is literally about the cataclysm and going back in time and seeing the king priest and all that, I was just so focused on the main characters. I had the absolute reverse to what Glenn experienced. I only focused on how the characters are doing and how drunk Caramon was and what was going on with Taz. I really didn't check out, of course I had to realize it to move the plot along, but I didn't really focus just on how bad things were in the past and what Istar was like back then, and the city and everything else that was going on. I was just like, okay, this is just filler. Can we get to what my favorite heroes are doing in the next chapter? Because when you're young, that's what you're reading. So I had the opposite effect. I was like, okay, I was actually able to slow down and take in more of my surroundings as I got older and more removed from the characters.
We've already kind of touched on this to some extent, but how has your life experience changed your perspective on the story, on the characters, and the quality of the prose?
I think the tension between Chrysania and Raceland I appreciate more as I've gotten older versus when I was young. And talking about Bill, talking about those moments where one's having to pull back and the other's pulling back, and they don't know if they care for each other yet, but they may, but they don't know if they're just playing pretend with each other, or is it real? That entire thing, and you're coming away as a reader not even really knowing, we're not supposed to really know. That's the point. And they did a magnificent job of doing that, but also creating this underlying tension that's not even kind of the point of actually the bigger events that are happening in the story. I really could grow more appreciative of reading, even if I thought it kind of things were ick. That's even more proving my point that was done very well. I think so.
I think I was far less sympathetic with Caramon as an adult than I probably was as a younger teen. He really frustrated me. The whole self-pity thing for the first quarter of the book was just, I hated it. So.
See, I saw it as him going through, not just substance abuse, but depression, which I think led to the substance abuse and then exacerbated the substance abuse and was exacerbated by the substance abuse. I'm not trying to, hand wave away the fact that he had these problems. Part of it's his own doing, because he really did make himself emotionally dependent on having Raceland to take care of. He was completely dependent on Raceland's helplessness, for so many years, for most of their life so far, that, he didn't know what to do with himself once he didn't have Raceland to take care of. Even though he was married and had responsibilities and back in Solace, he couldn't handle life without Raceland there to take care of him. I mean, I think he's a really sad case.
Yeah.
I pity him more than disdain him though. I can't say that I'm annoyed by it. I'm more, I guess, saddened by it, because I've seen too many people that were too much like, what Caramon's like at the beginning of this. I mean, maybe not so much the overweight, the endgame Thor side, but, people who are just emotionally dependent on others and had serious depression and substance abuse issues.
Mm-hmm.
I do actively dislike Chrysania now, where I don't think I did in the past.
That's common.
But it's Raceland that I really truly detest at this point, and I'm racking my brain trying to remember if he ever makes a change, and I can't remember. So I'm looking forward to reading these books in the next few weeks. So
I'm not saying more because I do remember, so I'm not saying more.
Yeah. As to the prose, it's still pretty much simple prose. I mean, it's adequate. I mean, it's not even up to the quality of Sanderson at this point. And, he's the one who's got he's the one who I usually use to describe adequate prose. Don't get me wrong, people. He's got the greatest characters out there and some of the greatest storylines out there. But the language he uses to write is adequate. And that's
Agreed.
the most appropriate word to describe it. I love his books, and I will continue reading his books. And even he says that. So, yeah, don't come at me.
It's true.
Yeah. What about you, Bill? Life experience changed?
Yeah, like I said, mostly with Caramon. I do acknowledge he has issues and everything, but I mean, just the character we knew to seeing where he is now.
Yeah.
And, it's so against his character to be that sort of woe is me kind of guy. And that's exactly what he's doing, which is what I find frustrating. So,
I get it.
Yeah, it frustrates me, and it breaks my heart to see Tika so torn up over it. I mean, to the point where she's trying to kick out her friends so they won't see him that way. That's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
So
that was painful.
I think that's what really set off my anger towards Caramon for the first quarter of the book, where I'm like, I just don't care, man.
You don't do that to Tika.
Yeah.
And Tika's too sweet.
As for the prose, I do think this was written for, probably teens to early adults. So, I'm not expecting a whole lot. It's not Ursula, K. Le Guin by any shape or form. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of reading a bunch of her stuff since I got my copy of the Illustrated Earthseas, and
awesome.
Isn't it beautiful?
Oh, it is. But the prose in her books, you go from that to Dragonlance. It's a step down, but I mean, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's adequate.
Yeah.
I'll go with Glenn.
Thumbs up for adequate.
Well, look, the story entertained me, and you wrote it well enough where you made me dislike and like certain people. So you've accomplished your job, and that's all. I really want are those moments where I'm so invested in the character and what's going on that I get a reaction of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
That visceral reaction. I love that. So
me too.
Jen?
Oh,
what do you think about?
Yeah, she answered.
Did you? Okay, my bad.
It's okay.
All right, so we kind of touched on this, or at least I did, with talking about how I don't feel that they really played into the fact that Caramon was an enslaved individual there, and his friends in the gladiator school, the games was. But are there any elements of the book that clash with today's social or political climate and that are problematic for you? Has this story aged well in the years since you first read it?
Oh, yeah. It's aged very well, let me tell you, because it talks about people who Let me describe it without saying the kind of people, and I know that both of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. It describes.
Could I read 2 quotes real quick?
Sure.
I think I'll read them after. I think the quotes will make sense.
I think it describes a bunch of people who are ethical and do-gooder people who are maybe a little bit conservative and that sort of thing, and think that they're doing what's best for society and their values, and it's not really that good of people. So I think that part's aged like fine wine, that entire society, in my opinion. So yeah.
Here's something the King Priest says. Paladine, you see the evil that surrounds me. You have been witness to the calamities that have been the scourge of Kryn these past days. You know this evil is directed against me personally, because I am the only one fighting it. I am the only one. I think I remember a leader, supposed leader, in the last 6, 7, 8 years to use "I am the only one" over and over again. It's kind of hard to miss. Aren't you glad I pointed that out for you?
Yes.
Yeah, because I never could have picked that up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all thinking the same thing. There are some religious aspects to this book that you could literally just sort of hold up to certain people today and go, wow, carbon copy. Yeah. So, yeah. And I mean, that hits a little too close to home.
Yeah. And that wasn't even the only one. There was another really good one that I didn't read off. But you have me now, Paladine. I can be your right arm. I'm like, oh my God. Will he please shut up?
Mm-hmm. Oh, he will.
Yeah,
he will.
I'm looking forward to him being shut up. I don't know if we see him again in the next book. I don't remember where the next book picks up, but I'm dying to dive into it. Bill, were there any specific things that stood out to you that clash with today's social ideas, social mores?
The slavery aspect, like we said, and the justification of it absolutely doesn't fly.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't really hold that against this book because it takes place in their past as well. Yeah. Something, they're sort of beyond as a society. Doesn't mean there aren't people doing it. But when we meet them in the first 3 books, most of society is beyond that whole slavery thing. So
I'm just seeing a major difference between slavery in this book and slavery as it's being handled in the other book I'm currently reading, Magician by Raymond E. Feist. We're talking about that in the near future. And I'm like, doesn't feel like slavery. That feels like slavery.
Yeah.
Well,
and
keep in mind, they have people working the mines, and Caramon almost went there. I'll bet you those people in the mines feel like slavery.
Probably, yeah. I'm sure they will if we see it. So, our final big question, well, we have our second to last question, I'm sorry. What, if any, are some themes and or character flaws that you notice now that you may have missed in your previous reading of this book?
None. All of the themes were so on the nose.
Okay.
To me, even as a kid, like now, it's not because I was so smart as a child or anything like that. It was made with the intent to be like, this is the kind of right person you should be, and this is definitely not the right kind of people, even though they think they're good, they're not. And I think it was trying to teach younger audiences kind of a lesson on certain kinds of people. So I think it was kind of, hey guys, here's a cautionary tale of how not to act like straight. fuck up. So I think it was with that intent. So yes, it's going to be heavy-handed, but that makes sense. And no, to me personally, I didn't like it's dead on, I think, in my opinion. Just personally.
Or even any themes you want to bring up that you noticed the first time around.
I think I did notice more this time. Like I said, the interpersonal relationship between Chrysania and Raceland. Before those sort of glimpses, I probably missed as a younger reader. I don't remember them, so I'm going to assume I missed them. But yeah, those sort of small moments where we get internal thoughts from each about the other and how they need to back off and they showed too much type things. Yeah, I definitely picked up on those this time. And like I said, it's really nice to see a sort of spark of personality from both of them because they're both so rigid in their way of thinking that it's kind of nice to see there is a little bit of give inside at least. You know, they may pull back from it, but it's there. So it gives me a little bit of hope.
To be honest, I never really read for themes, and I was probably pretty. I think I must have been pretty, oblivious to some of the character flaws, because there's stuff that did stick out for me. One character flaw, and it's to an extent a theme, is at least a motif, is broken and toxic relationships are all over the place in this book. Tika and Caramon and Raceland. Chrysania and Raceland is kind of a broken, that's abusive and some gaslighting almost going on there. Chrysania and Paladine.
Yeah.
Because, she really slips for a while there while she's in Istar. Raceland and his apprentice, I can't remember his apprentice's name.
Delamar.
That's just
Delamar, the dark elf. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's an abusive relationship there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of gross. And basically Raceland and everyone except himself.
Yeah.
I'd say Boo-Poo, but Boo-Poo and him were never on page together in this book. Boo-Poo is about the only character he's ever treated well. I already brought up the dependency, whether a chemical dependency like Caramon developed or a dependency upon another person like Caramon had his entire life. He's kind of the poster child for both of those right now. And then the negative nature of arrogance. I didn't know how else, I just want arrogance being a problem. And the belief that you're the only one who can do something. Like the king priest thinking he was only he is fighting or can fight evil. And that Paladine is weak without him. Just is like the most perfect example of that. Chrysania is even kind of arrogant a bit, and that doesn't go over well, but you see a lot of arrogance throughout these books, especially within the Churchhood of Paladine. A lot of that. But then there's also sacrifice, especially with Caramon, because he always seems to be trying to sacrifice himself for someone. Except for when he was a drunk shit. And, once he was sobered up, he's always got the attitude, but it was other people who sacrificed for him, like Kiri, the Siren, and Farragas. They both ended up sacrificing their lives for him. Would you recommend this book to younger readers today, or to more, or would you recommend it to more mature readers today?
Both. Honestly, both. Yeah. I think there are lessons here for everyone. Particularly in today's, we'll say, social climate. I think there are lessons in here for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's Caramon and his issues and trying to fix himself, and then the society of what's going on in Istar. Man, that's a lot going on today. So, wow, that hits a lot of different beats. The only thing I would say, obviously, the caveat of recommending that to somebody is, obviously, I would be like, you need to read Dragons of Autumn Twilight first. And the caveat to that is is I would probably recommend it to a younger Dragons of Autumn Twilight to a younger reader versus an older reader. So I guess as I graduate, I guess it stands the test of time to where you start as a younger reader, but then as you progress, the books become more nuanced for an older audience. So yes, caveat, you have to have read Dragons of Autumn Twilight first, of course, to understand, but Dragons of Autumn Twilight is for a younger reader. So yeah. Yes and no, if that makes any sense.
I'd probably recommend the book for both, but I would have warnings and different warnings for each of the two. Younger readers, I'd warn them that, there are some places where, you might find it a little less comfortable to read, and that it goes against a lot of some of the stuff you believe, and you might find it offensive at times, especially with the way slavery is handled and some other things, the tokenism of the one black character in the book, just like in the last trilogy there was one black character in the book. I'm still a little bothered by that, but and the older readers, I warn them that story was written with the younger set in mind. Not really. I wouldn't say this was written with people 25 or older in mind. I think it'd be under 25.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think teens 12 and young adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is who it's, I would hesitate to label it YA because some people get really really opposed to that label.
Yeah.
But it's not far off of being YA. That's for sure. And apparently all of us read it when we were in the YA age range. So, mid-late teens, mid-teens or so. So.
I don't get the thing about YA. I've read some great YA series. There are
a lot of people who object to it. Yeah. I have one contradiction that I found, and I pointed this out to you the other day, Bill. I'll read these two quotes. Tennis smiled and scratched the beard that no elf on Kryn could grow. Here's the other quote. He looked around and saw an elf standing in the room with him, observing him coolly. The elf was elderly, balding, with a long, meticulously groomed white beard. Beard. No elf can grow a beard. Elf with a beard.
I think the elf with the beard had to be a mistake because they've mentioned it several times that elves can't grow a beard. And Lorak and other elven characters we see that are male, Gilthanas, like other male full elf, there's no beard. So I think the full elf with the beard was a mistake. Yeah,
that was Laurelon, the one that was going around rescuing all the true clerics. That was the elven cleric Laurelon. Who has a meticulously long white beard.
Mistake.
That's where you need a good
Maybe
editor.
That was the God's way of saying, this is my messenger. Look, we gave him a beard. It's not even possible. That's how you know he's real.
That works.
The enigma.
Seriously.
Let's see.
That's great.
And the other one is, there was a line of somebody, Caramon hit the Minotaur in the last fight in the arena. Caramon's fighting the Minotaur, and he blasts him in the knee, shattering the knee, it says, and refers to it as a crippling blow. But then, almost without going to another sentence, says that it's only going to hinder the Minotaur for moments. I thought it was crippling. If it was crippling, would it really?
I think he meant crippling at the moment. We all knew the Minotaur could get up.
A shattered knee?
Have you seen a Minotaur?
Well, maybe they could push past it in their rage. Some people walk on broken feet.
Maybe.
Bloodlust.
I walked an entire afternoon, the rest of the day at school from 10:30 in the morning until like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a broken foot, not knowing I had broken it.
Yeah.
I knew I heard it, but I didn't know it was broken.
I've done the same thing. Me too.
And then my ankle was sprained in 2 places too.
Mm-hmm.
That was just, yeah. But yeah, I just it within the space of like a sentence and a half, 2 sentences, it's referred to as a shattered knee, crippling blow, and then says that it just hinders him for a moment. And I'm like, I mean, either it was crippling or not. He's
got some Wolverine adamantite skeleton skills.
He also has a giant trident that he can sort of use as a crutch. So
there you go.
Yeah. Okay. But
I'm willing to accept he could hobble.
See, I'm willing to believe in elves and dwarves and dragons and Kender, but you know, there are levels to my acceptance of.
We draw the line.
Unreal.
Yes, incapacitated.
Line.
Like, you know what? Elf of Beards, I'm done.
Done.
Yep.
I'm done.
Nope.
Throw the whole series away. We're done.
So, we will be coming back in 3 weeks' time with War of the Twins, I believe, is book 2.
Yep.
I think we have a returning guest coming back next time.
Yeah.
So, Jen, we'll see you in 3 weeks.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
Of course.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention, I haven't mentioned this publicly, but by the time you post this, it'll probably be out. I've been invited to be on the Wheel of Fortune trivia game with the Wheel Reads podcast coming out soon.
Oh,
so,
nice.
I'll be on that. I think we're reporting on May 12th. So it'll be coming out soon.
Keep us informed on when the date it releases is.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
definitely I look forward to seeing that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Hopefully, it's always fun chatting with you. It's been a few weeks since we last chatted, so it's been good to see your face while we talk.
Not much longer.
Just DMing back, yes.
It's going to be Dune time soon.
Children of Dune coming up on what the adaptation. So that's going to be fun.
Yes, it will be.
Bill, any last words from you?
No, just I'm actually looking forward to the next 2 books in particular. I do remember bits and pieces, but I do remember the end of the very last book. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember from the upcoming books in the Dragonlance series is pretty much the very end of Dragons of Summer Flame. The whole thing that I was remembering, trying to remember if I could remember or not, and it's like suddenly I remembered.
With the Tinker Gnomes. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Something else in there, something else that we talked about earlier, but I don't want to spoil anything.
Okay.
So for those who haven't read that book yet, you got about 3 books away, so about 9 weeks, and you need to read that. So catch up, y'all. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.